Could the Dallas Cowboys be getting ready to make a surprise pick at number 26? All that and more in this episode of Locked On Cowboys Podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by the Ultimate Football GM app. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise, then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDON, all in caps, in the game. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, it is draft day. I've had about 5 cups of coffee. I've watched the movie already. I am pumped.
Yeah, I had a nice little surprise at 3 a.m. this morning when my 8-year-old decided to kick in the door and decided to wake us all up after I had basically just gone to sleep only an hour before. So I am also very caffeinated and also very excited because it's all happening. It's football Christmas. It's all of it wrapped into one. Yes. We finally made it. We're just mere hours away from the celebration.
Yeah, and this is the morning of the draft is always a lot of fun because you get all these insiders posting their mock drafts. You get these last second thoughts. You got now the sports books are becoming a factor here. People are kind of seeing the changes in the lines. One of the things that we've seen that really started last night in Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft from NFL.com was Luke Musgrave, the tight end from Oregon State, going to the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah. Then this morning, there's some more rumblings about Musgrave. Todd McShay from ESPN just so happened to put Luke Musgrave in his first round. And then Luke Musgrave to Dallas in the first round. And then we've seen several other mocks today having Luke Musgrave mocked around the Cowboys. So just initial thoughts on all this Luke Musgrave buzz.
Well, there's so much to cover here. Really, I think let's start with why some of this buzz makes some sense, right? Marcus and I were having a conversation about this last night as it was kind of all developing. And I've had this theory, and I think Marcus agrees with me, that McCarthy has been better about managing leaks and managing information flow in and out of the star way better than the Garrett administration ever was. Yeah. And I think that has played itself out in the way that we've kind of come across some of these players that they are potentially interested in drafting. Think about what happened with Tyler Smith last year, right? Right around the day or 2 days before the draft, that is when we started hearing the whispers of his name into the wind. That is when it started becoming clear that the Cowboys were potentially interested in this player. Right around the same timeline when we started hearing about Luke Musgrave as well. I will say this, just kind of my initial thought was, it does make some sense because the Cowboys have shown interest in all the other tight ends that are in that group. The only name, there is a Luke Musgrave sized hole in their visit list, right? Because they clearly had interest, or at least looked at Washington, Kincaid. We know Kincaid and Mayer are high on their list. We've heard that they have some interest in Tucker Kraft.
Kraft and Washington were both 30 visits.
Yeah, and Sam Laporta, too, is another name we've also heard that the Cowboys have visited with. There is a huge Luke Musgrave-sized hole in that list, right? So that part doesn't shock me. I think the thing that would surprise me if he ends up being the pick is and someone brought it up to me yesterday, the Cowboys are usually very good about picking safe picks in the first round, like high floor players. They don't want to miss on their first round pick. Musgrave is a lot of things, but I would definitely say that he is not one of the safest these tight ends that you could draft.
He is not safe. And let's talk about why he's not considered a safe prospect. Number one, he just hasn't played a lot. Missed most of last season with a knee injury. He was behind a couple NFL players early on in his career. I think he's only played 20 games in college.
Yeah, I think it was like something like 13 starts in the last 2 years or something like that.
Yeah, so hasn't played a lot. He's not a blocker. Like, that's just not his game. On top of that, the production's really, really limited. 2 career touchdowns, 9 career drops, 2 in his career, 2 broken tackles. Like, not somebody who is going to, you throw the ball to him in the flats and he's going to make a bunch of guys miss. Like, not his game. But there is upside here, and that's why seen, and that's why we've seen him pretty frequently be mocked inside the top 50 picks.
I actually will push back a little bit because I think he's actually a better blocker than a lot of people are giving credit for, or at least he has the tools to become a good blocker because he's big, he's strong, he has very, very good lower body flexibility, and we'll get into like the high points of him, but I tend to think that the risk with Musgrave is almost exclusively in 2 categories: injury related, which he's coming off an ACL, but he doesn't necessarily have a huge history of injuries.
Are we sure it's an ACL? The reason I'm
interested to hear this. Yeah. Well, that's interesting because if you're saying this, because I was shocked to find out that he tore his ACL in the 3rd game, and suddenly he's able to participate in the combine and the Senior Bowl. So if you've got another theory here,
it was never confirmed that it was an ACL injury, but he went to the Senior Bowl and looked really good. I mean, he was clearly the best tight end of the Senior Bowl.
He was the fastest tight end that they've ever recorded since they've started measuring speed using GPS at the Senior Bowl. Yes. I mean, not just this year, they've ever recorded. So, he clearly is at a state of health that he was able to accomplish that. I'm sorry. The other category I was going to mention
I'm just thinking there's so many of these things that are just rattling around in my brain. I'm not sure how to get them out, but go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to say the other category of my risk, or I feel like where he may not make the upside, is what you just mentioned. He isn't super developed. He hasn't played a ton of football. He started playing football, I think, his senior year in high school or something.
Yeah.
This is the guy that I'm sure if you've heard Dane talk, he's a 4-sport athlete. That's the thing that Dane keeps hitting on, is that he played all these other sports that are very unusual for a football player and then came to football late. But I think that's what makes him so unique as well. I just, you don't see many guys that are that tall, as big as he is. I mean, he's too easy, 250 plus, easy 6'5 plus.
I think he was closer to 6'6" than he is 6'5".
Yeah.
And I think he was 256 at the combine. So let's say it was an ACL injury, right?
Yeah.
He was running within 7 months of the injury. Actually, not even 7 months. He was running a 4.61 at 260 pounds.
Yeah, with like a 1.54 split, if I'm not mistaken, too, which is ridiculous. That's a good wide receiver split. If you watch him play, you just don't see many big tight ends that move this low to the ground with such smoothness. And I think that's a attribution to his skiing, to his lacrosse playing. I think the skiing helps with that hip flexibility because you have to open things up when you're slaloming and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And he gets really low, and his pad level is really low, and he can really move. Look, I will also say about the 9 drops. 4 of those 9 drops, which is half of them, came his sophomore year when before he really kind of broke out into the rest of the season. So, that's absolutely true. He did have a lot of drops, and he still, I think, ended up with 5 to 2 drop ratio in those last 2 seasons. So that's not great either. But I think that the drop thing is not as much a concern for me as some of the other stuff.
I want to talk about why I think the Cowboys are interested in Luke Musgrave and why he could potentially be the pick at number 26 for the Cowboys next. This episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. You've heard us talk about this mobile game before, and if you ever thought that you'd make a good GM, you've got to give this game a try. It's not quite as easy as you think to create a dynasty. When you play Ultimate Football GM, you get to control and manage every strategic aspect of your team as you play through seasons and try to lead your team to glory. With Ultimate Football GM, you are responsible for controlling the destiny of your franchise by hiring the right coaches and coordinators, managing the salary cap and all the finances throughout the year. Plus, you're going to have free agency, the draft, player personnel issues that pop up, locker room stuff, and all the ups and downs of the season. All of this in a challenging but realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline, so you can play on the go as you want to and when you want to. Locked On Cowboy listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On, all in caps, in the game store. That is Locked On, all in caps, so make sure you check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. I want to let you guys know about the Locked On NFL Scouting Show, which is going live on YouTube with Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, with other Locked On NFL local experts at 7:30 Eastern Time on Thursday. You can go to their channel. They're going to be talking all night about round 1 and round 2 and round 3 on Friday. And then on Saturday, after every round, they'll be there to recap all of the action. So again, 7:30 Eastern Time. Check out the Locked On NFL Scouting YouTube page with the Draft Dudes. Landon, let's talk about why this move makes sense. Kind of when you look back at what the Cowboys have done the last couple of years in the draft, we've seen them kind of go away from safe prospects, to be honest, right? Like, say what you will about Tyler Smith. He was not a safe prospect, right? He had a bunch of holding penalties in college. He played at Tulsa, didn't play at a Power 5 school, but he had great athleticism and power. They took him in the first round. Last year, second round, they took Sam Williams, somebody who had a 96 relative athletic score, not super polished, but highly, highly athletic. 2021, they took Micah Parsons, kind of this hybrid guy who didn't play a lot of football because of the COVID year, right? Skipped the 2020 season, but they gambled on athleticism. I wonder if this is a change in philosophy of, let's stop taking the guys who are maybe a little bit capped out or maybe are limited athletically, and let's kind of shoot for the stars here.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a very good point. I mean, obviously, I just kind of made the opposite point, but I think that doing so was kind of a historical trend that, frankly, predates Mike McCarthy. You're not wrong. Like, this is one of those things that maybe the philosophy has changed a little bit since McCarthy's come in, and about the type of players they would rather put the onus on coaches. And this brings me to another point that you brought up that I want to give you credit for, that I think is great. I think the Cowboys have really strong confidence in Lunda Wells' ability to develop tight ends. I think clearly, like, this is something you brought up to me when we were discussing that, you know, and it's a great point. Like, you look at what he was able to do with Ferguson, you look at what he was able to do with Hendershot. Maybe they have confidence that, because here's the thing about Luke Musgrave, it's there. Like, it's not like you have to develop him to become a great receiving threat. I mean, honestly, he can line up and run the seam and be a seam buster for you right now. I think that if you got a coach who can develop a player, then Lunda Wells, I mean, then I'm already confusing the player with the coach, then Musgrave is not as low a floor player as like some of these other guys. I mean, it's not like you see tape of him doing things really poorly. You know, honestly, I think he runs routes really well. He understands how to be physical through contact. You know, despite what it says about the drops overall in his career, I think he catches the football well. He can high point it. He has some nuanced stuff that he could work on, but this is not a guy that, like, you're going to need to draft and redshirt by any stretch of the imagination. He will get on the field and play. It's just a matter of how much, depending on, how it goes.
98th percentile athlete, and you see it. Like, I think I tweeted it last night. There's just some routes that he can run that no other tight end in this class can do, because there's tight ends in this class that are faster than he is, but they're not as big as he is either, right? So I think I sent you one of the plays. He's running like this deep over route, and he just beats actually, I think it was a linebacker to the spot, and because he's so big, it just presents this massive catch radius. So there's a lot to like. It is a highly, highly risky pick, just because, man, I always get nervous about guys that can't stay on the field, especially at that position. Like, that was one of the things that we liked about Jason Witten the most, is like, you knew he was going to be out there regardless, right? And it's one of those positions that you just have to find ways to keep yourself healthy. But if the goal is to find the next Jimmy Graham, Travis Kelce type that can change the way you play offense, Musgrave has a hint of that.
I'll just bring two things that kind of popped up. You talked about the kind of over route that he ran that was unique. I don't know if you saw, but I think it was against Fresno State, maybe.
Mhm.
He ran a across the field wheel route. Did you
Yes.
see that? Where he
Yes.
ran an over and then an up,
Mhm.
and the smoothness in which he transitioned from running over to up the field for a guy who's 6'6", 250 is rare. I mean, again,
It is.
it's because he's of a very non-traditional athletic upbringing. This is a guy who, is a hurdler. He's a slalom skier, so he moves differently than a lot of these other guys. I will also mention too that about the injury, I think I tend to agree. I don't love that I'm not comfortable with exactly what the injury was, but I will say that it's not like he has multiple of these sort of lower undescribed lower body injuries. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was one injury. And I will add in this. Imagine what, just based on the first two games you saw of the 2022 season before he got hurt in week 3. Imagine if you were able to extrapolate that out through a whole season. Where do you feel like this guy would have gone? Like, I feel like if he had a season, if he had shown us and developed, just kind of a normal curve, I think this guy would have been top 15 pick.
It's possible. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's possible. And that's what's so tricky about this. Do you feel like you're getting value here because of the injury, or are you overdrafting him a little bit because of what he potentially could be? I don't know.
The risk.
I don't know.
That's the game.
I want to talk about why the Cowboys seem so dead set on drafting a tight end in round 1, or if even that's the case, and maybe you disagree with that. But let's do that next. This episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious snack but don't want all the sugar and the calories, then you need the best tasting protein bar ever. It's Built Bar. You've got to try it. They taste healthy. They taste amazing. They're absolutely healthy for you. Only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein. Come in so many great flavors, including churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. Best of all, covered in 100% real dark chocolate. That is right, real chocolate. And now you don't even have to wait. You can still go to built.com, see their whole selection of Built Bars and Built Puffs over there. But if you live next to a Walmart, go to the pharmacy section. You can pick up a 4-bar box of the cookies and cream, the double chocolate, or the coconut puff. Or if you happen to live close to a Sam's Club, like I do, you can run in, you can grab a 13-bar box with some of the hit flavors, including brownie batter puff and churro puff, and you can thank us later.
Real quick public service announcement. Make sure you hide your Built Bars, because if you have any 8-year-olds in the house, they will find them.
Yes, they will. My daughter calls it special treat. When she wants a special treat, she gets a Built Bar. All right, Landon, let's talk about just the Cowboys' interest in tight ends, because I've been seeing this all day today. Some people are just dead set against the Cowboys selecting a tight end in round 1 because of the depth of this class. Like, why do you need to grab one of these guys in round 1 if you can wait till rounds 2, 3, 4 to grab a similar player? What are your thoughts?
Well, I would simply point to the actual mock draft in which these people are being drafted. The reason that these teams are having the Cowboys grabbing Luke Musgrave is because Dalton Kincaid and Mayer are already off the board by the time they get to 26. And I think in this draft, if Laporta wasn't already off the board, he comes off the board like 2 or 3 picks later. Yep. So by the end of the first round, you've already eaten up 4 of these 6 tight ends that we have all targeted as immediate starters, right? Or as guys that could come in and immediately contribute in a heavy way, as much as a tight end can, right? Yeah. So I think that's the answer, right? Is that as much as we talk about the depth of the class, I think these guys are going to go very quickly. I will also add that I think what the Cowboys are looking for is adding an impact pass catcher. Yes. And I think that they are finding that they're going to get more bang for their buck from a tight end as far as just an impact player, someone who's going to be on the field more than potentially a 4th wide receiver that you drafted. And I think that they view that as a good meeting of the value in this class and what they're looking for. So that's why I think that they're looking for tight end. I think if the wide receiver class was better near the top or better in the first round, I think that would be more of a focus. But listen, I mean, they clearly brought in a whole bunch of wide receivers. They clearly were trying to look at these guys to see if this is what they were looking for. I think that they went through all these evaluations and determined that their best situation for getting an impact player that's a pass catcher was more than likely to get a tight end in the first round than being able to potentially even get one of these wide receivers they want in the first round, or waiting another round for, that group of wide receivers to be eaten up between 26 and 58.
Yep. And I just don't think the depth in this class matters all that much to the Cowboys, because you don't need a Jake Ferguson. You don't need that number two tight end that can block a little bit, or even that number 3 guy that can, be as an H-back. That's just not what you need. What you need is something different, right? Somebody who can be a threat as a receiver, whether that's Kincaid with his quickness and being able to win after the catch, or whether it's Musgrave who can win down the field. I just don't know if the Luke Schoonmakers or the Brenton Stranges or Will Mallory's, or name your 3rd, 4th, 5th round tight end. I just don't know if those guys do anything for Dallas.
They're not just looking for another body. I mean, they will look for another body if they don't get a tight end in the first round, but I don't think that that's what they're hoping to do with their tight end room. I think they're
because they've got 3 guys they like already, right?
Yeah. I think they're hoping to.
Sean McEwen.
I know you did. I know you did, buddy. They're hoping for a guy. Still trying to make it. They're hoping to add a guy to the top that's going to change the equation a little bit. Now that they've kind of done their shuffling around at wide receiver, look, they could still add an impact wide receiver, but it's not going to. He's not going to have as much opportunity as a first round tight end potentially would to be on the field to make that same impact. So I think it makes sense.
All right, final prediction before we head out and we watch the draft tonight. Who do you have the Cowboys taking at pick number 26? Let's rephrase it. What position do you have the Cowboys taking at number 26?
I think it has to be either a tight end, an offensive lineman, or a pass rusher. So I guess I would probably put it in or if I'm power ranking positions, right? I would say tight end, pass rusher, offensive line.
I'm going to go Michael Mayer as their pick.
You're just going straight up and then picking a name, huh? That's fair. I think Mayer is probably the betting favorite, right? I don't know actually what
and to be honest, the 2 names that came down to, I think it's between Will McDonald and Michael Mayer. If I had to bet, I think McDonald's more likely to be there than Mayer. I just get the sense that Mayer is not going to be a fit for everybody, that he's going to fall a little bit because he's just not quite as dynamic as some of these other tight ends in the class.
Maybe.
But we shall see. We'll see what the Cowboys do when they are on the clock at pick number 26. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you guys for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Landon, you and I will be back tonight to break down the Cowboys selection, assuming they make one. Even if they don't, we'll be back here to get you ready for day 2. Follow the show on YouTube, Locked On Cowboys over there. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we'll see you guys next time.